Hi, and welcome to Girls Lunch, your mealtime companion where we talk about food, gender, sexuality, and where everyone is welcome.
I'm Nicole Hilton.
I'm Julia Andreas.
And Julia, we are back for part two of our Hershey episode. I looked back at our previous episode list and I realized that we have been doing a lot of two-parters. So I promise I'm raising my right hand that the next episode that I host, it will not be a two-parter.
I also promise that the next episode, which will be the next one I host, it will also not be a two-parter.
Okay.
It will be one part.
And we are high-fiving. We're going to cut our palms and high-five through the video screen. Yep. We made a blood pact.
We've done it.
Every great episode starts with a blood pact.
I agree.
Okay, so we're back for part two. Well, it's been a little while for you and I, but also if it's been a little while for the listener, do you want to give the quick version of what we talked about in part one?
I'll do my best. So part one, we followed early Milton Hershey and his careers of ups and downs and lefts and rights and twists and turns, where he started out as a little candy man, and then that didn't work out for him. And then he started a different candy shop, and that didn't work out for him. And then he followed his deadbeat dad to Denver, and he learned how to make caramels without wax in it. And that seemed to work out for him, but only because of the love and care and money provided to him by his mom, his aunt, and his relatives. And then when Hershey made it big with caramels with no wax in them, he, was at our favorite cameo, the Chicago World Fair.
Yeah.
And he was like, what is this new fandangled machinery? It was machinery to make chocolate. And in episode one, I gave a very in-depth description about a lot of chocolate machinery. And he bought it all. He was like, I'll take the lot. And he took the lot. Mm-hmm. And then he started making his own chocolate. But his chocolate was special and different because his chocolate could use fresh milk instead of powdered milk. However, it does make it taste kind of weird. And so people from Europe don't like it.
Yep.
The end.
That's a great summary.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that basically brought us up to the actual chocolate portion of Hershey's Chocolate Company. Hershey without the chocolate, which I guess is like Hershey's white chocolate or something. Cookies and cream, maybe.
Cookies and cream. I hate that bar.
That's definitely D-tier Hershey chocolate, I think. Well, it's also not even really chocolate. It's just chocolate leavings,
It's just cocoa butter.
It's nothing. It's a real nothing bar.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's pretty much everything. We are going to pick back up where we left off, which is around the turn of the century, around World War I. By this point, Milton Hershey has, as Julia said, figured out how to make milk chocolate, and he is now selling it to great success.
Great success.
Great
Mark
success.
That off your Girls Lunch bingo card.
Yep, we got the Borat reference in early. We can now all move on. So he's selling his milk chocolate. People are loving it. At least Americans are loving it. I believe last we spoke, Milton was building a factory at little farm town in Pennsylvania that has since been named Hershey, Pennsylvania. There's a large factory that makes all of the chocolate, packages all the chocolate that's there in the town. There are also homes and community spaces and parks and things like that for employees to live at, shop at. People sort of work at the factory during the week and they live in the town, and then they visit Hershey Gardens and Hershey Park on the weekends. And at this point in history, Hershey Park is a park, right, with like trees and nature.
A park?
Yeah, like a park.
You've been to a park before.
Yeah, no spine-tingling roller coasters yet. That'll come later. One reason that Hershey's chocolate is so successful is the price point. So they really popularized this idea of the nickel bar. Not to be confused with Nickelback, the band.
Look at this bar. Sorry, I had to.
I'm so glad we got that in there. One of the reasons Hershey is so successful, his idea is to make better chocolate that can be made in huge quantities and priced for the masses. So if we think of like, this is like industrial revolution times, right? We are just generally getting more mass manufactured commodities for this rising middle class. Milton sort of brings that idea to chocolate. Rather than it being this super expensive luxury good, it is something that, most people could afford, or as one of the books that I read called it, an affordable indulgence, something that there is a continuous market for. They talked about how, like, rarely do you go to the grocery store and you're like, I need to buy chocolate, right? 8, 9 times out of 10, if you are buying chocolate, you're somewhere and you're like, oh, a little chocolate bar sounds pretty good right now,
A little sweet treat.
Humans do love a sweet treat. We do love a little treat. And that's sort of what Hershey's business model is. And obviously it's, successful. So obviously, of course, a Hershey bar does not cost a nickel anymore. Over the course of time, they had to raise the price from eventually, the biggest jump goes from a nickel all the way up to a dime, which let me tell you, people were mad about. People had big feelings about it. They were not happy that the price of a Hershey bar doubled. But the way that they were combating this, we see this today in what's often called like shrinkflation, where you have like the same thing, but the company will change like the ratio of things, or they'll make the overall thing a little bit smaller, but they'll keep the price the same. That's basically what Hershey was doing for years and years and years, because they had really built their brand on this like nickel bar idea. But by the time they realized, like, we really probably need to revisit this in 1968.
That's way later than I would expect, yeah.
Yeah, so rather than being a full ounce, like it was at the beginning, it was only 11/16 of an ounce, or 0.6875 ounces, which is like, that's like 70% of the size it used to be. But they try to combat this when they're like, all right, we have to raise the price. Like, inflation's sort of finally caught up with us. They are like, okay, well, it's going to cost a dime now, but it'll be 1.25 ounces. It'll be bigger. This doesn't work. Everyone is like, what the fuck? I have had my Hershey nickel bar since I was a wee bab, and now it's cost double the price, and everything is terrible.
Kids these days and the economy and the world, and we'll never recover.
No. But of course, a Hershey bar does not cost a dime now either, right? They've changed the price many times since then.
It's like, what, $2? $2.65 now? I'm gonna Google it.
And how big is it also?
A standard bar is 1.55 ounces and is about $182 to $100. No.
Nope.
God.
God, nope. This economy.
Woo. Is about $1.82 or $2. Somewhere between $1.82 and $2.
Okay.
Not 100. My God.
It's not. Not yet. And so as I was saying, Hershey is also one of the first major candy companies to start selling chocolate at places other than just like candy stores and pharmacies. So we kind of talked about this last time of like the place that you would usually get candy from back in the day was like a confectioner or a candy store.
My dream job.
Yes.
A little confectionery guy with my little suspenders and a funny little hat and a bunch of jars with sweet treats in them. That's my dream job.
So Milton Hershey thought that there should be more places to be able to get chocolate besides a place with nice jars and a man with little suspenders. And so they start selling at places, like I said, grocery stores, lunch counters, bus stops, newsstands, anywhere you might be just sort of out and about and have that moment of like, ooh, you see a little chocolate and you're like, ooh, don't mind if I do. It's only a nickel. So that brings us to World War I. So World War I happens for reasons that are beyond the purview of this podcast.
A different podcast.
That's a different podcast. At the time, at the start of World War I, the U.S. does not join World War I right away. If anything, we try to hold off basically as long as possible. We are not interested in getting dragged into World War I. but we are eventually anyway. So when we do join the World War, the soldiers need chocolate, obviously. That's,
of course.
Right up there with guns and bullets and tanks. They also have to have chocolate. So Hershey becomes the first supplier of candy to the U.S. military in 1914. And then after the war, they continued to work with the military in the burgeoning field of chocolate science, which we will discuss more later. It's around this time that Hershey starts building its relationship with the U.S. government, which it still has today, right? There's because of like, oh, we're a supplier to the military now, which I guess is prestigious. It makes you important. It puts you on sort of like the national landscape, right? Like you're not just a guy making chocolate. You are like the chocolate supplier to the U.S. military, And we still see this close relationship between Hershey and the U.S. government today because of their status as this like major American brand. I saw in the news that Hershey had asked Daddy Trump if they could please ease up on the cocoa tariffs because it will be so bad for business. I'm sure they did it in that exact voice.
I can't imagine any other way they would have done it.
Basically, Hershey went to the U.S. government and they were like, we need an exception from these cocoa tariffs because they will drive prices like up so bad, and the usual like it'll hurt American jobs and it'll be bad for the economy and blah blah blah. The idea that like Hershey is a big enough brand that they're like, well, we should be exempt from this like national sweeping law, I think just sort of speaks to their role as a major brand.
Their special boy status.
I
also think it's really funny because, the episodes we did right before this are home economics. And I also talked about, like, how all these women joined the war effort and, like, home economists were, like, used to, like, create the rations for the war effort. And then, like, after the war was over, their budget disappeared and they got no recognition. I guess all that budget went to chocolate science.
Oh.
And Hershey.
Maybe.
I'm like, oh, okay. So, the government did have the money. They just put it somewhere else.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So thinking about, general trajectory of American history after World War I and, the Roaring 20s, we have the Great Depression. So generally, the Hershey Company does all right during the Depression. They generally, like, keep people employed. They have their sort of own, like, works progress administration type thing where, if you don't know what the works progress administration was, it was where FDR and the New Deal, they, like, employed a bunch of people to, like, build public buildings and parks and invested in a lot of, like, infrastructure projects to keep people working and sort of keep money flowing. So Hershey sort of has their own version of this where the company starts investing in a lot of like capital projects. So they build a new hotel, they build a sports arena, they build some offices and some other buildings around town. They don't ever have any kind of like mass layoffs at the factory, which is good. But they do cut hours and overtime, and they also get rid of annual bonuses. So there's a lot of favoritism in the hiring and firing process at the Hershey Company at this point, which is hard since it's a small, isolated town. I guess to some degree it's not surprising since it is a small, isolated town that there would be a little bit of favoritism. But I imagine it probably makes things awkward when you all go to the same church on Sunday or you run into people at Hershey Park on the weekend,
Dude, what would you even do? Like, what other job would you be able to get?
I mean, you could work at, one of the stores in town. I imagine you probably could work at Hershey Park, like if you get fired from the factory. But yeah, I mean, your options are certainly limited. So because of this favoritism, cutting of hours, all that type of stuff, some of the staff get sort of resentful, which I think is fair. Eventually, they decide to band together. They form a union.
There it is.
There we go. The union tries to have conversations with management at the Hershey Company. They don't get very far, and so they decide, okay, we're going to have a strike, and they hold a strike in 1937. The strike is peaceful for the first couple of days. It's just sort of like a sit-down strike, right? So everybody like comes in for work that day, and they just turn off their machines. They just sit and don't work. But then eventually, by day 5, it does turn violent. And again, sort of since this is such a small ecosystem, everything is so interconnected. The reason that things turn violent is not necessarily like, I mean, it could obviously be argued of like, you know, did management start this? Did they stoke these tensions or whatever? Did they provoke somebody? But the initial group of like people who are angry at the strikers are actually a bunch of dairy farmers who are like, no one is working at the factory and therefore no one is buying my milk. My milk is getting curdled.
Ooh.
I'm not making any money. This needs to stop, basically. So the dairy farmers all show up at the factory with their pitchforks and baseball bats and things. And union members are beaten, bloodied. I mean, no one dies, thankfully. But it's not a pretty sight. Eventually, after this, the union and the company come to an agreement. Workers get more paid holidays. They get bonuses back. You know, some of those types of things. Milton was pretty hurt by this, by all accounts, as you might expect, because he sort of felt like, I've done everything I can for my employees. I built a whole town for them, right? I set up housing that was affordable to them. I brought in utilities. In his mind, he had done basically like everything for his workers, and he felt like they turned on him. And that really, I guess, like, there's a lot of trust broken there, which is sad.
The parallels to Disney are quite interesting here.
Yes, I do have that written probably on, like, the next page of notes, so I think that that's very funny that you brought that up. Would you like to elaborate on that, though?
I'll try. Walt Disney, in a very similar way, in many ways, to Milton Hershey, he had his small ragtag group of animators, and in the early days of Disney, they were kind of treated like a family, and, you know, as things got bigger and conditions changed, and in 1941, like, the animators a lot of them went on strike because of, I think, similar things like favoritism and unequal treatment and unequal pay and like extremely long hours. And Walt had like a very similar hurt feelings by this, where he was like, he felt betrayed by his like company and his team, and he was like, well, I built this and like I thought we were all like a family, and you turned against me and tried to unionize. And very interesting parallels between Milton and Disney.
Yeah. So after, you know, they sort of wipe all the blood off the floor, I guess, from the strike.
Clean the equipment off. This is the place that makes food.
Exactly. Yeah. These teeth are not sanitary. They should not be in chocolate. After that all dies down, the U.S. goes back to war in the sequel, World War II.
Terrible sequel.
Yeah, the terrible sequel. And it is time for the field of chocolate science to make its real debut. Hershey, and by that I mean William Murray, leveraged their existing relationship with Uncle Sam and the U.S. government to get an exemption from sugar rationing because they said it was critical for the war effort. And they also get the contract to make chocolate for soldiers' ration kits. By the end of World War II, Hershey produced more than 1 billion, with a B, candy bars just for soldiers. I also just love that William Murray was like, oh no, sorry, I know that everybody else in the country is rationing sugar right now, including perhaps our other chocolate competitors, but we are the special boys, and because we have special boy status, we do need the sugar. And the U.S. government was like, oh, absolutely, you're right, I'm so sorry.
Anything for you.
Anything for you. So not only does Hershey get to continue making chocolate sort of uninterrupted for the American people, they also create a very special chocolate that is called Field Ration D. That is what goes in soldiers' ration kits. The field of chocolate science pioneered heat-proof chocolate. Like I said, in between World War I and World War II, Hershey chemists and folks were working with people in the U.S. government to develop a heat-proof chocolate bar that would be able to be sent along to soldiers in their ration packs, basically anywhere, like regardless of whatever climate they were deployed in. It needed to have a high energy value, which I think just means calories, and, quote, tastes just a little better than a boiled potato.
I love that line.
I know. And the reason for that is because they intentionally wanted it to not be too tasty, right? Because if you think of like ration kits, the idea is like, this is food that soldiers have so that they do not starve, right? Mm-hmm. This is like, I am trapped in the jungle somewhere. I need to eat so that I don't die. Or whatever.
Whatever.
Insert like terrible disaster prisoner of war scenario here. So you can't put like a regular chocolate bar in there, because if I'm a soldier, I'm deployed somewhere that almost certainly sucks. I'm watching everybody around me be killed or, maimed and everything. Would I not want to just dip into that ration pack for just a little bit of chocolate reprieve?
Dude, I would be the soldier who ate it like on the way. Like I wouldn't even make it to the country I'm supposed to be deployed in. I'd be like on the plane like,
chocolate.
Chocolate bar.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't mind if I do.
So they intentionally nerf the Hershey's flavor because it is too powerful.
Can I get that on a shirt?
Yes. Uncle Sam nerfed the Hershey's flavor because it was too powerful on a t-shirt. I was reading in one of my books that I read for research some interviews with some Hershey employees about making this field Ration D. And I would love if you could read some of these quotes for us, Julia.
I would love to. It was like clay when we got it from the mixing room, remembers Leonard Hoffman, who worked on the production line. You had to shovel it into a huge bread dough mixer and cool it down. Then it became more like putty. Ew.
Yeah.
God knows what all was in that bar. I happened to find out the hard way how nourishing it was. When I was cooling it, I would reach into the mixer and make a little ball about the size of a marble and put it in my mouth. Funny, I was never hungry. Used to take my lunch home with me every day. It's like Columbus bread.
It is like Columbus bread, yeah. I read a really cool article on the Hershey Community Archives website about the Ration D bar and everything that went into making it, its legacy, all that stuff. I, as we always do, will put a link in the description to that source. It was a fun read, so you can check that totally out. So for making this chocolate bar that tasted a little better than a boiled potato, and for all of their other services to the U.S. military during World War II, Hershey earns a number of military citations. Supposedly, everybody in the factory gets this like fancy little gold pin that they get to wear that they're all very proud of. The pin for special boys. As a result of this collaboration, Hershey becomes even more popular with Americans because it's something that we sort of associate with that wartime patriotism. Chocolate like kept us going, it kept us in the fight. We emerged from World War II not only with the great scientific innovation of heat-proof chocolate and field Ration D, but Hershey, certainly gets a boost in sales, a boost in national image. It helps spread the word of Hershey's chocolate across the country, not overseas, as we talked about, because it's a flavor that apparently only really Americans like, which I still think is funny. But, many more Americans are thus introduced to Hershey chocolate, and they're like, this is pretty good.
Super special boy status.
Exactly.
Promoted.
In 1945, unfortunately, Milton Hershey passes away.
R.I.P. King.
R.I.P. King. He passed away in 1945. Obviously, Hershey's still around today, as is Hershey, Pennsylvania, as is Hershey Park. There is plenty of corporate history in between Milton's death / World War II and now, but a lot of it is just sort of like business stuff that I just don't really think is very interesting, and so I'm not going to talk about it because this is my podcast. This is our podcast, excuse me.
We can do what we want.
I think the only business thing that is worth mentioning, in 1918, this is not long after Kitty dies, if I'm not mistaken, he puts all of his stock in the Hershey Company into a trust, right? So like as the primary owner of the Hershey Company, he has like a zillion shares of stock in Hershey, right? So he decides to take all of that stock and he puts it into a trust. And in the rules of the trust, money generated by this stock can only be spent on the Hershey Industrial School.
Oh.
Which, if you don't remember from last time, and I don't think we really mentioned in this episode yet, the Hershey Industrial School is the school that Milton and Kitty set up for orphan boys in the Pennsylvania area so they can get an education, learn practical skills, stay out of trouble, all that type of stuff. I'm breaking this down into like such a degree to like where the sort of like explain this to me like I'm 5 because this is the only way that I understand stocks and trusts and things.
I don't get them.
I also don't either, but it is important here. So because all of the stock, like the majority stock for the Hershey Company, can only be spent on the Hershey Industrial School, this effectively makes the trust that holds all that stock the company's biggest shareholder, and therefore basically the owner, right? Since a company reports to its shareholders, and if you think like there's only a certain amount of stock in this company, whoever owns the most of it owns the company. So effectively, the school like kind of owns the company in a weird way.
Huh.
And this trust is still intact today, despite multiple attempts to change it over the years. So there have been referendums and things and whatnot, but it's never been successful, I don't believe, which means that the Milton Hershey School has like billions of dollars that it does not really know what to do with. It is like one of the most well-endowed schools in the country. I think it has like more endowments than like Harvard and Yale or something.
Wow.
Like it's just, I mean, because the Hershey Company just makes so much money, right? And it's all locked in effectively this one box, right?
Dang.
And also, it's worth mentioning when Milton does this in 1918, he doesn't tell anybody. He just like, I guess, goes to the bank or draws up some papers and just like does it. And then effectively doesn't technically own the Hershey Company anymore. You know, like not really. The press only finds out about this like 3 years later. And then, of course, they run like a front page thing about like, you know, Milton Hershey donates like billions of dollars worth of stock to the school. And everybody is just sort of like, what?
Huh?
What? Which means that Milton Hershey dies basically a poor man, at least in terms of like assets, because all of his like money is tied up in the company. And so he's just like, well, I'm just going to give it to the school. But obviously he's fine. Like he is still sort of like the unofficial mayor and doesn't have a problem affording his day-to-day expenses by any means.
I think it kind of shows like where his priorities were, where it doesn't really seem like it was about making copious amounts of money. It seems like it was like, you know, making candy and then also making a living for people and then like providing people with opportunities. And then he was just like, I don't need this money. I'm just a guy.
I'm just a little candy man.
It's like, I'm just a little candy man. What am I going to do with all this money? And so he just like puts it in, you know, the thing that his wife loved, which I think is very sweet.
The thing that was most important to both of them. Hold your thoughts. I love where your head is at, but I want to hold your thoughts on that to the second half of the episode.
I got it.
You got it? You can put a little pin in it?
I'm clenching him with my little lobster claws.
Okay. So if we want to talk about Milton Hershey's legacy, I would say, I'd be curious to hear if you have different opinions on this, Julia. I would say that Milton Hershey's legacy is probably, in this order, Hershey's Chocolate / the Hershey Company, followed by Hershey Park, followed by the Milton Hershey School, formerly known as the Hershey Industrial School, # put Kitty's name back in there.
Put Kitty's name back in there. The hockey team's not up front, Nicole?
Well, for me, in my heart, yes.
No, I would agree with that ranking. I think if you think Hershey, you think the chocolate bar first, and then the park second.
Yeah.
And then if you know about the school, probably the school third.
So here we go. This is what I was talking about earlier, my mention of Walt Disney. When Milton dies, the company really struggles with, like, what do we do now? So as, you know, Julia was alluding to Walt Disney earlier, it's a similar situation in Hershey where you have this, like, very charismatic founder that sort of builds up this whole empire. Everybody thinks that they are just like the special boy, the, you know, creative genius. They're so smart. They have all the ideas. And then when they pass away, everybody's sort of looking around and thinking like, well, now what? Or like, what? Anytime the company has to make a decision, they're sort of thinking like, well, what would Milton do? Or, you know, what would Walt do? Also, the fact that this all happens in like a relatively small town that is all built in his name doesn't really help.
Yeah.
They all sort of build up him as this like mythic figure, as this like very much legacy. You know, he's a glorious founder.
The founding father.
Exactly. Yeah. He's the reason that we're all here, the reason that we have so much success, that we have all these wonderful things. He was just a generous, kind old candy man that loved everyone and gave all his money away, and, you know, which like a lot of it is true, but like, I mean, no one person is entirely like that, you know?
No.
You're certainly like glossing over a lot of things. I mean, as we said, and as I think people can probably guess, like Hershey Park morphs from this free park that's mostly gardens and, you know, maybe some jungle gyms into a full-on like theme park tourist destination with high-speed roller coasters and definitely no longer free admission.
Nope.
And then if we want to know about what happens to the Milton Hershey School after Hershey dies, as I said, it still exists today. It is no longer exclusive to orphan boys from the immediate area. It's opened up to kids of all genders. The primary qualifier is financial need. You don't necessarily have to be from Pennsylvania, although I think there is some kind of like, I think it's probably the type of thing where like you might get some extra points on your application. But financial need is like the biggest kind of qualifier. And a side note that I wanted to include is when Milton originally opened the Hershey Industrial School, as it was called at the time, he wanted to cater specifically to boys because he felt that orphan boys, quote, are likely to be looked upon as a nuisance, end quote, and not orphan girls. He wasn't so worried about them because he felt they are, quote, useful in the home. So there's that.
Just gotta get that in there. God, what a time.
What a time. So nowadays, students at Milton Hershey School, we kind of talked about this before, where like the expectation was back in the day, like you go to school, you learn your reading, writing, arithmetic, but you also like help out around the farm and you like do chores and things like that. So students nowadays still live with what are called house parents, because it's still a boarding school, but there are like parents to kind of look in on them, and students are expected to help with chores around the house, but they definitely are more focused on academics and career readiness. They are definitely not milking cows at this point, right? They're doing other more modern chores, I imagine. And as maybe you might expect with, you know, billions of dollars floating around, that kind of wealth tends to attract problems. So some scandals in the recent past at the Hershey Industrial School include child sexual abuse.
No.
Which is obviously a big yikes. We won't talk a lot about it, but just know that it's certainly not a perfect place. And mismanagement of funds. So like I said, this is not really surprising that with billions of dollars floating around, that tends to attract some nefarious intentions. But it is like a real school, and students do go on to get like real careers and go to college and, you know, otherwise become productive members of society. It's not like a shell corporation or anything like that, I don't think. But it's certainly not perfect either. So now that we've sort of finished with Milton the man, his legacy, I would be remiss if we did not talk about some wacky Hershey marketing, which I could spend all day talking about, but we're going to do rapid fire. The first and biggest one I want to talk about is the idea of Hershey's chocolate, quote, for health or being nutritious.
They did this with donuts, too.
Yeah, man. This is a really big campaign during the Depression, especially where they were saying, like, it's just as good as a meal, basically. Where they're like, oh, it's only a nickel for a Hershey bar, but it's so filling and it's so sustaining. And apparently Hershey liked to say that an ounce of chocolate provided more energy than a pound of meat. I don't know what the source is on that or what the nutrition
Source
science is.
Vibes.
Yeah, source. It was revealed to me in a dream. I mean, that's not the first time we've heard a claim like that. Snickers is not a Hershey product, but if you think about those Snickers ads that are like, you know, you're not you when you're hungry. Exactly, right? Or that like, oh, it's so filling. Hershey makes the argument that their chocolate is good for you because it's made with fresh milk. And fresh milk is good for you. So therefore, by the transitive property, the chocolate that contains the fresh milk must also be good for you.
sounds logical to me. I don't see why anyone would think otherwise.
Julia, I have here a little excerpt that I would appreciate if you could read. That is an article that sort of goes over the nutritional, quote-unquote, aspects of Hershey that is titled, Experts' Opinions on the Food Value of Chocolate and Cocoa. So if you could please read these, preferably with an old-timey accent. You don't have to do the accent.
I'll try my best with the accent, but I'll probably lose it like a few sentences in.
Okay.
Edith C. Williams, director of the American Food Journal Institute, says that chocolate and cocoa are foods which have gained a rightful place in the diet. As their composition shows, they contain minerals, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, thus supplying 4 of the essentials. When chocolate and cocoa are combined, they are, with milk, we have a particularly nourishing food which builds bone, gives energy, and builds tissue. It can be readily seen that as children grow and build bone, they build faster than adults, and they need more protein and less energy than the grown-ups. Children need milk, as milk contains valuable minerals for bone building. If chocolate or cocoa is added to milk to make it's... Sorry, this is just the chocolate for Cusco. Cusco's chocolate.
Yeah, it really is.
If chocolate or cocoa is added to milk to make it an attractive beverage, the children receive an energy, heat-giving, muscle-building, and bone-building food. Because of its comparatively small fat content, it is easily digested and is therefore an excellent food for children. Cocoa is especially recommended for the child, who must be encouraged to take milk, for it will usually drink its proper quota if cocoa is added in correct proportion. For the invalid and persons of delicate digestion, cocoa is one of the most nourishing and easily assimilated of products, and when milk is added, it becomes an almost perfect food.
An almost perfect food
almost
really gets
perfect
me.
Food.
I love the logic here, which is basically about like chocolate milk. Like, I think this is still today of like, oh, well, add a little bit of chocolate there just to get the kids to drink their milk, right?
Mm-hmm. I think this is also really funny because, like you said, it is just chocolate milk. And, you know, I was in lots of sports, and as kind of like a children's protein shake, they would give you like chocolate milk as like what you would have afterwards. And like Olympians like Michael Phelps have talked about like, oh yeah, you know, after I, you know, do my workout or whatever, I drink chocolate milk because it's like nutritious and it's got like the fats and the sugars and stuff. And what is a protein shake if not just really bad tasting chocolate milk?
That's, you know, there's something there. I did think it was funny also that they talk about like chocolate has minerals, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, which like, yeah, that's just what food is. Like food is made of those things. Like, what are we doing?
It is not sterilized water.
Yeah, exactly. Another wacky marketing thing that I learned about when I went to the Hershey Museum and got to see some of these in person was the Hershey Company would send free educational kits to schools for teachers to show children how chocolate is made. So each kit has like 7 or 8 glass jars that each have cocoa and sort of the various stages of the process. So like there's a jar of beans, there's a jar of nibs, jar of cocoa powder, with the idea being like, here, teacher, you can like teach your students how chocolate is made. Sponsored by the Hershey Company for no reason, just because we care about your education, you know.
Question, do they still do this?
I don't know.
Because, hand to heart, swear to God, when we were at college, I was taking that anthropology of food class. We had someone from Hershey come in for a class and like talk about how chocolate was made.
That would not surprise me. I mean, I fully believe you that happened, A. And B, I wouldn't be surprised if they still do things like this. Because Hershey is so synonymous with chocolate in America also.
Which, like, I had completely forgotten about until I read this paragraph. And I was like, oh, shit.
Wait, that did happen.
Wait a second, that did happen.
And then I think this is my favorite fun fact that I've been telling any single person that I meet on the street anywhere at any point in the last, like, 6 months since I visited the Hershey Museum. But the Hershey Bears hockey team, which I mentioned earlier, they were not always called the Hershey Bears, Julia. They were originally called the Hershey Bars. They were called the Hershey Bars. B''ARS. the Hershey Bars.
Oh my god.
But then the league said you can't name a team from after a commercial product, and they went, oh heck. Well, they're the Bears now. They're the Bears.
I was gonna ask you why they were called the Hershey Bears, because that didn't make any sense to me.
Because they were the Hershey Bars at first. And the league was like, no, you can't just have a team that's advertising.
Okay, well, we'll put one letter in there. It's not Hershey Bar anymore. It's Hershey Bear.
Fuck
Fine.
you, they're the Bears
now. Are you happy now? Wow. I've learned so much. What an educational podcast.
This is maybe the most educational our podcast has ever been. And the last marketing thing that I wanted to talk about very briefly was the Hershey Company has done a couple of stints. We were talking about chocolate leave-ins, about how white chocolate is just cocoa butter and stuff. They have tried many times in the past to make products from chocolate processed leftovers. So they did have, for a period of time, mulch made out of cocoa shells, because they were like, God dang, we got all these cocoa shells. Gotta do something with them. I don't know. Maybe people buy them for their garden? For mulch? Is that anything?
I'm surprised they didn't try and make cocoa shell tea. That's another way that chocolate companies try and pawn off the cocoa shells. FYI, it does not taste good. That's why it don't work. It don't sell because it tastes bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're ever like at a fancy coffee shop and it's like cocoa skin tea or whatever, it's just the shell mulch
And water.
And it's not tasty. And it's not like hot cocoa. Don't let them lie to you.
And you know what? It's not very nutritious because there's no milk in it.
There's no milk in it at all.
Terrible. Another possibly terrible product, I actually don't know if it's terrible. As we said, there's plenty of cocoa butter hanging around because that's a byproduct for making chocolate. The Hershey Company made cocoa butter soap for a while. This was another one of Milton's pet projects, trying to make some kind of cocoa butter soap. Milton Hershey lost probably like millions of dollars trying to make Milton's soap shop happen, and it just wouldn't stick. I don't know if it was something about like the smell or like it didn't clean very well, but didn't quite pan out.
Forget Milton's chocolate corner. This is Milton's soap shop.
It really was just like, this is a little old man who has more money and time than he knows what to do with, and he just needed a little project.
He's like his mom. He just has to wrap the chocolates still, even though he doesn't like need to. He has to.
I've got to do something, man.
He's got to do something.
With that, we have reached the end of part 1, and I would like to toss it over to my co-host Julia in the newsroom with the food fact of the day.
Thank you, Nicole. Here in the newsroom.
All right.
Cool. So, Nicole, welcome to the Food Fact of the Day, a segment where we talk about a food fact today. Have you ever used any of the recipe or menu building apps on your phone? You ever gone to the app store and been like, recipe apps, and downloaded an app on your phone? The kind where you input all the stuff you have in your fridge and it'll give you a recipe that you could make with those ingredients.
Oh, I did not know such a thing existed, but
did you not?
I did not, and I'm like, Jesus, that sounds like that would solve so many of my problems.
Oh, well, this opens a big door for me, and I shall walk through it now. Okay, so...
Can you hold my hand? I'm a little scared.
Yeah, I'll hold both your hands.
Okay.
Both of our bloodied hands.
Our bloodied hands.
Yeah, so I've actually seen these apps essentially like ever since like the Apple app craze, like there's an app for that, all that stuff in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. Like one of the earliest apps I remember was like a recipe book app where you could like input your recipes and like have them somewhere to look at. There's also ones that popped up around the same time where it was like, oh, you don't know what to make for dinner. Well, maybe you have like beans, a can of tomatoes, and some ground meat. You can make like chili or something. Mm-hmm. And so you would like put in the ingredients you have, and it would like search its database of recipes for matching ingredients and then give you a recipe you could make with those. They never worked very well. And then also, with like smart fridges. Have you heard of a smart fridge?
I have. I really don't. I'm not a fan. I don't like it. I don't need a computer in my... No. I want a dumb fridge. I love my dumb fridge that's from 2010, and she's a workhorse.
You and I worked in, I still work in cybersecurity, but you also worked in cybersecurity for a time. And I feel like you and I are of the mindset of that meme that's like, if my printer makes a funny noise, I'm going to shoot it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, so yeah, like, smart fridges, I don't know if they actually do this, but there was like this marketing ploy of like, it'll analyze what you have in your fridge and tell you like what you can make with it and like tell you if you're like running low on milk or whatever. Anyway, so this is an evolution of sorts, right? But this idea does not start with the app. It does not start with the recipe app. It actually is as old as some of our first computers.
Oh.
You see, back when science fiction was becoming real and computers started becoming something, actual, in the 60s, one of the first ways people thought that they could use this newfangled technology was making life easier for women in the kitchen.
Yes, I know about this.
Science, real science. It's 1969, and here enters the Honeywell kitchen computer. Do you know about this already?
I certainly don't know everything, but I am aware of it, and I'm so excited to learn. I can't wait to meet her.
I mean, like, unfortunately, there's not that much on it, so you might already know everything.
Okay.
But I will do my best to educate you. So Honeywell was a computer brand at the time, and
They're still around.
they're still around, yeah.
Mhm.
The kitchen computer was their, like, latest newfangled technology. And it was featured in a Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog, which is where we get most of the information about the computer because, as you will learn, it had a sad life. The blurb that was on the page of the magazine, which I have included a picture here for you, is quite something.
Yes, there she is. She's stunning. She's so sleek.
Can you describe to the viewer what the computer looks like?
Yes. Imagine a calculator, right? So like imagine not like a fancy graphing calculator, but your basic sort of square calculator where you've got all the buttons on the bottom and then there's a little screen on top. It sort of looks like a giant version of that on a pedestal.
It's very sleek, very like futuristic.
Yeah.
It's red, white, and black. It does not match any of the decor shown in this kitchen.
Nope.
And it also is just in the smack dab in the middle of the room of the kitchen. It's like blocking the refrigerator. It's horribly placed. There's going to be a link to the Wikipedia page that has this picture up in our source notes so you too can look at it. So I will read to you the lovely blurb from the Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog.
And I will stare longingly at this photo and wonder about what could have been.
What could have been. The title of which says, "If she can only cook as well as Honeywell can compute. Her soufflés are supreme. Her meal planning a challenge? She's what the Honeywell people had in mind when they devised our kitchen computer. She'll learn to program it with a cross-reference to her favorite recipes by Neiman Marcus's own Helen Corbett. Then, by simply pushing a few buttons, obtain a complete menu organized around the entree. And if she pales at reckoning her lunch tabs, she can program it to balance the family checkbook. $10,600.
Holy
complete
cow.
with 2-week programming course."
Oh, and you get a program. That's nice.
Yeah, so this computer was offered for $10,600 US, equivalent to about $88,000 now. That's more money than most people make in a year. It weighed over 100 pounds, and you would have to take a 2-week-long course to learn how to program it because it only worked in binary.
Oh, so you just have to learn binary
You
to
just
use
had to
this
learn computing
God.
to learn how to use the kitchen computer, whose main task was to like store recipes. So, you would be like programming your computer and you'd be like, I need a menu built around lasagna. And then it would build a menu around lasagna and then create a shopping list. Or you could also, like the apps, input ingredients and the computer would spit out a recipe. It could also, like the ad reads, fulfill tons of other feminine tasks such as budgeting, checkbook balancing, and doing your child's homework.
Oh, fun.
Little Timmy's got a big day tomorrow in computing class. You've got to learn how to program for him. Like I said, it was only in binary, and you needed an additional teletype plugin to actually like type on the dang computer. And all those extra recipes it mentions by Helen Corbett came at an extra fee, not included in the $10,600. And so there's no record of any of them ever selling.
That's, I guess, not surprising.
Not surprising. And only one of them exists today at the Computer Museum. And that is all we really know about this beautiful creation of the Honeywell kitchen computer.
I would love to go to the Computer Museum to see her.
I'd say, man, I would love to lay eyes on this beaut.
A pilgrimage.
A girls' lunch pilgrimage.
Girls' lunch on the road. We are going to the Computer Museum.
We need to get like little travel mics. So we're just like recording. We're like at the museum and we're just like, okay, we're here.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. But at least if you got one of these, then you know binary, and you can go and get a computer science job as a woman in the late 1960s. I don't think that would be hard.
Oh, yeah. Very welcoming, very egalitarian sort of society at the time, honestly.
I mean, look how futuristic this thing looks. Are you telling me that, like, there's gender-based violence in a society where the kitchen computer exists? I don't think so.
I can't argue with that. You're 100% correct.
Thank you, Julia, so much for telling us about the kitchen computer.
You're very welcome.
And now we will talk about some other women who used other technology to make chocolate.
Let's do it.
And we will get wiggy with it in our women, gender, sexuality section of the show.
Woo!
Okay, so last episode, our wiggy section was about sort of the women in Milton's life. And today I want to talk about the women at the Hershey Company that literally, like, made the chocolate. So there are certain jobs at the Hershey factory in Hershey, Pennsylvania that are primarily staffed by women. Perhaps the most obvious example is wrapping Hershey's Kisses.
Ooh.
In the early days, wrapping Hershey Kisses was a manual job. This is not something they had machinery for at the beginning. They had machinery to make the chocolate, but to actually like wrap the chocolate was a different kettle of fish or box of chocolate, I guess.
Anyway. Different box of chocolate.
Whatever it is Forrest Gump says in the movie. So in the early days, machines will make the chocolate, they spit it out onto this conveyor belt, and women have to grab the chocolate kiss off the conveyor belt and wrap them. If you've ever seen that very iconic episode of I Love Lucy with Lucy and Ethel where they're at the chocolate factory, it's kind of like that. Initially, Hershey's Kisses had this like flat piece of tissue paper that was stuck inside the foil that sort of assures the customer this is the genuine Hershey product, right? Except it's not really effective because the way it is like if you picture you have foil, tissue wrapper, chocolate. You're not going to see the tissue wrapper until you have bought and opened the chocolate.
Yes,
so you're not really gonna know if you've bought the genuine article until you've already bought it, you know? And obviously, because the Hershey's Kisses are very popular and successful, there's many imitators. So eventually, in 1921, they get rid of this little piece of tissue paper, and instead they come up with the little flag, or what is called the plume, which is the little, I guess, rectangular strip of tissue that sort of peeks out of the top of the Hershey Kiss. So know that before then, it was just a little square of tissue paper.
I always wondered why they did that. Now I know.
Yeah, so the idea is if you're at the candy shop or wherever, you can clearly see on site, like, oh, it has a little flag that says Hershey Kisses. It says Hershey. I know that this is the real thing.
I only eat super special boy status chocolate.
Exactly. I purchase only the finest chocolates from the specialist boys designated by the U.S. military. So, Julia, I have a quote here from The Emperors of Chocolate, which was one of the books that I read, that talks about the process of women wrapping these Hershey's Kisses. So, if you would please read that.
Initially, wrappers were paid by the piece, a practice that encouraged speed and also shortcuts. To wrap a single kiss was a delicate process. The tissues inserted in each one had a tendency to blow away and were difficult to handle. A proper wrap required picking up the tissue, laying it on the foil, placing the kiss on top, and twisting the whole package together. But this process took too much time. Some workers were known to pick up a kiss, lick the bottom, dab it on the pile of tissues, then deposit that on the foil and twist. Not exactly sanitary, but fast. Yep. I'm like, yeah, I can see that.
I guess it's a good thing that we have the little flag now, and we don't have to worry as much about our Hershey's Kisses being pre-licked, you know?
Pre-licked Hershey's Kisses.
Yeah. So other jobs that were largely staffed by women included knockout, which is a very loud room where chocolate bars were knocked out of the molds with hammers after setting up. So it's like you pour the liquid chocolate into the mold, and then after that hardens, they need to get knocked out of the mold. These women apparently did this without earplugs. Like, they were interviewing one of the women who worked in the factory for a long time, and she was just like, we didn't have earplugs back then, so you just had to suck it up and deal with the noise. And I'm like, okay, all right.
Gosh.
I do genuinely wonder how many of these women experience hearing loss, because, like, it's a non-0% for sure. Because they're just coming off the assembly line and you're just going bang, 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 bang. And then you got to do it again and again. And, you know, all of this is factory work. So as we were saying, this is all like factory work that's very mechanical, very industrial, not very cute.
Not cute.
It's pretty backbreaking, you know.
Oh, yeah. I have only fractured or broken a bone once in my life. That was when I was working at the chocolate factory. And it was because a side of a piece of machinery fell on my finger and smushed it real good. It's not cute feminine work. It is big machine.
And you didn't even get a cute little hat or suspenders or anything like that.
None of that, man.
No. None of the aesthetic.
None of the aesthetic. Just a hairnet.
Yeah. So it's for reasons like this that perhaps some of the lighter jobs like wrapping and packaging is sort of exclusively women's work until around the 1960s. Wrapping and packaging is an extremely busy department, includes wrapping kisses like we talked about, and also wrapping chocolate bars, which is a little bit more automated. It gets fed into a machine. Julia, I have another quote here. There are a lot of good quotes from, like I said, I thought it was really cool that they interviewed some people who actually used to work at the Hershey factory.
From Emperors of Chocolate. Some women stayed in wrapping their entire careers, working 30 years or more with one machine. Over time, a relationship of sorts would develop. These women would come in early and they'd oil the machines and wipe them down and check the parts. Remember Jean Raniero? Nobody else could touch their equipment. It was like their very own child. All of them wore crisp, starched white uniforms, and their silk stockings, white shoes, cotton linen hats, and white dresses. They could have easily been mistaken for nurses.
It's giving Harvey Girl.
It is giving Harvey Girl.
These women have to be clean. They have to be crisp. No slouching. I mean, like we were just talking about, it's probably not surprising that there were some jobs that women were explicitly prohibited from doing, or like only men were allowed to do in the Hershey factory. One example of this is the cocoa department, where fires were a constant threat. Because it has something to do with like humidity in the air. Humidity is like your enemy when you're making chocolate because there's water in the air and you don't want water in the chocolate, but you can't have the air be too dry. You've got all this machinery around. All you need is just two hammers or pieces of equipment or whatever to knock together and start a spark, and then you have a fire going. So it's this reason that women are not allowed to work at the cocoa department. Women also contributed to making the Ration D during World War II that we talked about. So Philomena Castelli, one of the hundreds of women who kept the Hershey plant running during the war, because obviously most of the men are deployed, she recalled the physical strength required to keep the line running smoothly, making this Ration D. If you remember the other quote that we gave earlier, one of the workers was talking about, it was like putty, right? It's like so thick. They had to have special machinery actually made to make this Ration D. So Philomena Castelli says, quote, "That bar could kill you if you weren't careful. It got stuck to the molds and the rest of the machinery, and you had to go in there with your hands and dig it out. But we did it because we knew the GIs needed chocolate. They needed Hershey to win the war." What? There's so much there.
Wild.
It's wild. There's so much there. The idea of like you've got your patriotism wrapped up with a product, association with a product, and national identity. The idea of like chocolate as like necessary, as like a sustaining food, right? I mean, also like this Ration D is supposed to prevent starvation. So they really do feel like they are contributing to like the wartime cause.
The soldiers are on the front line, but you're on the chocolate line.
Exactly. Like the donut dollies, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think to close out here, we can, Julia, do you still have your little pin in your idea from earlier?
I got it. My lobster claws.
All right, so open up your lobster claws. So this is not necessarily wiggy, but I want to close us out by thinking about the idea of Milton Hershey. And I mean, we've already talked about other similar figures, like we said, Walt Disney. Milton Hershey really raises a question that I think we're still struggling with today, which is, what is the role of a billionaire? Milton was not technically a billionaire, but still, I mean, multimillionaire. What is the role of these like super wealthy people in American society? Like, what is their responsibility? What should they be doing? Milton Hershey built his fortune in an era with a lot of other tycoons, like your Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and this like Gilded Age era of extreme wealth and also extreme poverty. Does that sound familiar at all? I mean, this is sort of the whole point of studying history, right? Is so that we can take it and apply it to our current context. So I do wonder, like, how is Milton Hershey different from your Jeff Bezos, your Elon Musk, right? These guys that have billions of dollars, or these massive companies that are, especially in the case of, I guess, Jeff Bezos and Amazon, like very integral to American business, American jobs, even though, you know, a lot of it is overseas and whatnot now. But I think that I would say, well, I'll get your thoughts. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay, give me your thoughts.
I mean, I think it's a spectrum, a very short spectrum. I don't think you can have like a good billionaire. There's no good rich person.
Sure.
Because being rich does not equate to a virtue. But I think, you know, the way that you use your excess of wealth is important. Milton gave it to all of it, essentially, to like a school, like something that he believed was important. All of our modern day, like extremely wealthy people, and my husband is a high school teacher, you know, he talks about this a lot. It wouldn't even take a fraction of the wealth that like Musk or Bezos has to like fully fund America's education system for like a year or 10 years, right? Like you have these systems that are scraping for money, that barely have money, like our public education system or our libraries or any other sort of like publicly funded thing where it's like the hordes of wealth that people like Musk and Elon, well, actually Musk and Elon are the same person.
Yeah.
Musk and like
fuck him
Bezos
twice. He double sucks.
I know.
Yeah.
He does double suck. You know, they're not contributing anything back to their community, and it's not like they can do anything with all that money. What's the term? It's like diminishing returns, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Where it's like no one needs that much, and you shouldn't be able to have that much money, especially when like a high school teacher with over a decade of experience and a master's degree gets paid below the poverty line, and yet you have so much money that you could pay that person a living salary and it wouldn't even look like pennies have gone out of your account. In my opinion, it is something that really bubbles my soup. Really boils my soup.
Really burns your waffles.
Really burns my waffles that there is just such an excess of wealth being hoarded by one person or two people, and not even a fraction of that wealth could do so much good elsewhere.
And I think that is a very similar idea in this quote that I'm going to read from Milton Hershey. And I think it's one way that Milton is different than some of our billionaires today, as you said, Julia, he leaves all of his money to the school. And Milton Hershey is on record saying the following in an interview that he gave as he was getting older. He said, quote, "I never could see what happiness a rich man gets from contemplating a life of acquisition only, with a cold and legal distribution of his wealth after he passes away. After all, what good is one's money unless one uses it for the good of the community and humanity in general?"
Snaps, Milton.
Snaps. Like,
snaps.
I think he kind of gets it, you know?
He gets it.
But at the same time, he's certainly not perfect in a lot of ways. And it's also, I think, worth talking about like in my day-to-day job, I work with a lot of nonprofits, and something we talk about a lot is the idea of like the population that you are serving should be involved in the decisions that you are making about programs or things to fund that population, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are, to give a very obvious example, trying to put together a program for people experiencing homelessness, you should consult with people experiencing homelessness to be like, hey, what do you need? Like, would this be helpful for you? Instead of just saying, I know what people experiencing homelessness need. I am an expert. Which I think you could argue that Milton Hershey did have what we would call a very paternalistic view of philanthropy, right? A very sort of like, I know what people need. I know what's best. And I think this comes out during the Great Depression with the union, right? Where he was like, my employees are fine. They have regular jobs. They have regular hours. They get decent time off. They have this wonderful park that they can go to. They've got great homes and a great public transportation system. What else could they need? When really, if he had maybe been more communicative with his employees who were not happy about like, hey, we'd kind of appreciate a little bit more fairness in hiring decisions, or we aren't getting our annual bonuses anymore, but we really need those, or like, you know, all those types of things. I mean, I think you still could argue that Milton was more in touch with what a working person needed, in the sense that he was a working person for a long time, as we talked about in the last episode, which I think is different than a lot of our uber wealthy people today who just like have no idea, like they're so out of touch. They have such privilege. They have never struggled for money. A lot of it is like generational wealth. They just go to business school and just, you know, get promoted to all of these upper management positions and like don't really understand the struggle of like your common working man. I just think he's an interesting figure to consider in our modern context.
He is. Yeah, I think I completely agree. He is a different flavor of someone we've seen quite a lot, I feel like, on this podcast of
a chocolate flavor
of wackadoos. He is chocolate flavored. Actually, he is caramel flavored.
Oh, you're right. You're actually really right.
But yeah, I mean, like on this podcast, we've talked about a lot of the same sort of vein of personality, of like ambition and drive and ingenuity and things like that. And how usually it's like, and they were a terrible person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with Milton, it seems like, and he was a normal person.
Yeah.
Not terrible. And of course, never idolize the past, never idolize, you know, figures in the past, because they were all human and none of them are perfect. But he just seems like he was overall just a guy.
Just a guy. Thank you for perhaps one of the most intelligent discussions we've had on this podcast.
I know. I feel like I've learned so much about hockey,
yeah.
other things.
So with that, we will say thanks for lunching with us. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
I don't know why I wave. They can't see me.
Not a visual medium. Our theme music is Red Onions by Louis Zong. Please check out the rest of his album Vegetable Soul in the description. If you have an episode suggestion or want to say hi, you can email us at girlslunchpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. A time's worth of chocolate chips, my good man.